Today the topic is the making of the constitution. The making of the constitution is not an easy task. Before going into the details of making of the constitution, let us discuss about what is constitution. Constitution is a fundamental document which states all the rules and regulations of the land of a nation. Constitution is a fundamental document which states all the rules and regulations of a nation, of that particular land, of that particular region. Every nation has its own constitution. The constitutionally valid points are called like legal rights. Now, moving on to the discussion of constitution, let us analyze what are the constitutions of Nepal and Japan so that we get a clarity on what does a constitution mean to us. Let us see here, the Nepal, the neighboring nation of us. The Nepal is located on the northeastern part of India, which shares a boundary, and 5 states of India shares boundary with Nepal. Now, moving on to the constitution of Nepal. Nepal is a nation which was ruled by monarch. They are having hereditary monarchy where the people have resorted against it, revolted against it, have done many rallies against them and gathered at many places and showed their dissatisfaction. So finally from 1951, various times the people of Nepal have showed their dissatisfaction and moved on towards against the will of the king. So finally in 2007, the interim government or the king came down to accept the constitutional setup or to give complete democracy towards the Nepal, and king becomes a nominal representative whereas the parliament becomes the supreme. So in that process of its journey, in 2007 when the parliamentary setup was formed, they came up with establishment of constitution. In the constitution, whatever we say, constitution gives us idea of 2 points. One is what are the rules and regulations that are present in that particular nation, and the second one is what are the ideals and the goals of the nation that are to be reached. Coming to the first point, what are the rules and regulations? The rules and regulations are entrusted with the responsibilities. You can get an idea about the fundamental rights, the directive principles of state policy, the powers of the prime minister, the powers of the president, the powers of the legislative assembly, the powers of the parliament, the powers of the president, the powers of the supreme court, the powers of the entire members of parliament, the powers of individual members of parliament, the powers of the opposition leaders. All these together are entitled in the constitution. Not only these, the constitutional limits are also entitled here, which are considered as crimes are also considered in the constitution. This is the first point which is covered in our constitution of any nation. Moving on to the second point, what are the goals or the ideals that is the nation going to project it towards its constitution? For example, like equality, liberty, fraternity, these are the principles which are going to be projected in the constitution. So when you read a constitution of any nation, you get the idea of the fundamental duties or the rights or whatever you get in the nation, along with the goals or the ideals which the nation wants to or will or shall be in pursuing them in the further process or in the future of for their nations. In this process, Nepal achieved its independence in 2007, formed into a parliamentary system, then got converted itself into the constitutional setup. Even now, the constitution of Nepal was in framing in the 2007 till date because the constitution has its own loopholes in the Nepal background. We shall come back to Nepal, but before come back to Nepal, we will discuss about Japan. Japan was a nation which got the parliamentary setup in 1946 after the Second World War came to end and Japan was defeated in the hands of the Allied powers. Finally, they dropped the king's autonomy and monarchy was given up, and we got the presidential parliamentary system, not the presidential system. Now moving on to the parliamentary system, king is present even today also, but the king powers are just a nominal representation, just like the Britain queen. Now the powers are vested with the prime minister of the Japan. So they are also having the prime ministerial government. Now what is the constitution of Japan mean for us? The Japanese constitution also clearly states the same ideology of what the other constitutions frame for us. Generally, the basic rules of the constitution of Japan are like all are treated equally, everybody is given the equal opportunity to entertain and to progress in their future, and they also clearly specify that all the resources of the nation of Japan have to be utilized properly. All the people's efforts should be utilized properly, and they have to respect the interest of the other nations. The Japanese also expressed the view in their constitution that the government is a sacred trust given or by the people towards its representatives. The power of the government is nothing but the people have bestowed some power in the representatives, and the representatives in the interest of the larger community act only on behalf of the people. So they have to be firm in their actions, and there should be in their mindset that they are going to do a larger benefit for their people. That is a clear idea of what the Japanese constitution gives us in the picture of first point. Moving on to the second point, they also respect all the other nations as they respect their own nations, and they also made a statement in their constitution that they will try to respect their nations as well as they will ask the other nations also to respect their principles. In the wake of these two world wars, where the other interests of the nations were not respected properly, where the Germans were not interested properly in the World War I defeat, Treaty of Versailles, so Japanese government made a clear statement that we have to respect the ideals of the other nation as we respect our nation's ideals. So in this point of time, we can come to the clarity that as per the experiences, as per the leaders' wish and the intention of that moment of time, we get the ideals got struck into the constitution, which can be further be amended, but most of the times the basic structure of the constitution will not be amended. So now coming back to Nepal, what made the Nepal till now not to yet to form a constitution? Even if Japanese people can form it by 1946, and now from 2007 the Nepal people are trying to form a government. They already formed the government. Now they are going to write a constitution, to draft a constitution. The world's largest constitution in the entire world or in the entire globe, the bulkiest constitution is the Indian constitution, which was written in just 3 years. So what made the Nepal people to wait so long? From 2007, it's 2014 now running, and even then they are falling short of making a constitution for themselves. And even in Nepal, we don't have much diversity as we have in our nation. So what is the point that is binding them or not making them to move on to form a separate constitution for them, or what are the principles they are going to struck up here? Because we'll discuss about that. Now moving on to the background of Nepal. What happened in Nepal exactly? To understand the Nepal's constitutional background, we have to understand what is happening in Nepal clearly. So in Nepal in 1959, we got a revolt. The people started to revolt against the king. The king name is King Mahendra. King Mahendra agreed to give the parliamentary setup and restrict himself to a constitutional monarch. So when he agreed in this point of time, the elections were conducted and the process was going on, but the constitution was not framed yet, and it is just for a namesake government is being run. Finally, up to 1991, the say was as usual going on, and the king was using his entire powers. Only for namesake we have the constitutional setup. So finally in 1991, we got elections for the parliament, and the Congress, the Nepal Congress Party. The Nepal Congress Party has won the elections with a huge majority and took over the government's responsibilities. Now after taking over the responsibilities, the Communist Party people are not satisfied with the Congress government. What made them to not get satisfied is that even today, even the Congress Party is having majority in the parliament, but the word of the king is final. They are not utilizing their powers very clearly. This way it went on up to 2007. Finally in 2007, the Communist Party people agitated and gathered in groups in the mass gathered and revolted against the Congress government, and then in the next elections the Communist Party of Communist Party of Nepal won the elections and formed the government. Mr. Koirala became the Prime Minister of the Nepal nation. Now what is the question that is binding them to make a constitution? They can make a constitution from 1959 to 1991 or from 1991 to 2007. So in this long span of period, when they were running along with the nation or a systematic form of governments, what are the features that are binding them not to make a government is that when they were framing the form of governments or the constitutional setups, when they're framing a draft of a constitution, they are framing according to the interests of the nations or interests of the leaders. The point is to be remembered is that the interest of the people is the main criteria, and the future generations of the people also should feel comfortable with the draft of the constitution what we are making on. So the leaders has to keep in their mind that they have the responsibility of the future generations and to take forward the nation in the further steps. So the people did not concentrate much on this. So the constitutions were failing in the Nepal. Finally, now in 2007, after the Communist Party came into power, they started to frame a constitution. Now what is a constitution? The constitutional experts clearly states that the constitution provides us two basic ideas. The first basic idea is that it provides clearly all the duties and responsibilities of the top executives of the nation, as well as the members of the parliament, as well as the citizens, the fundamental rights, the cabinets, duties and responsibilities, everything in detail with the single note of duties and responsibilities. At the same time, how to build on a nation with the perfect guidelines are also be entrusted in a constitution. Now moving on to the Nepal's issue, what is binding it from making a constitution from 2007 till date is that the Nepal leaders are still in a Confucius state whether they are going to frame it on the interest of the people or at the cost of their own political careers. So here we have to remember the point that the leaders don't have the clarity or could not get up the perfect picture on what would be the future of the Nepal. This is the main reason why the Nepal is not able to form a constitution of itself. So when could Nepal get a clear idea of all these things? We have to wait and watch till they get their clear picture. Then only they can draft a perfect constitution for them. Now moving back to India, what was the basic criteria for Indians to frame a constitution? Who led the Indian members or the leaders to frame a constitution? What are the basic criteria that were meted out by the Indian leaders to frame a constitution? Exactly how many days it took for the Indians to frame a constitution? How did the people express their dissatisfaction? Is the assembly having complete representation of all the people? These all points we will discuss in this next part. Now we shall move on to the making of the Indian Constitution. How was the Indian Constitution made? The making of the Constitution, India. What is the meaning of the word making of the Constitution? Here we are not going to cook anything or we are not going to do anything. We are collecting the information and we are framing the rules and regulations for our people, our nation, our system. At the same time, what are the goals, ideals which we want or which we faced problems because of the Britishers, that we are going to get rid of them through making our own constitution. Let us see the background of this. Now I think you all remember, like, when did India get independence? 15th August 1947. So before this, I think you all remember that cabinet mission has come to India to discuss about the separation of India and Pakistan. As soon as when they came in 1946 itself, they told that they are going to give independence for India. As soon as Mountbatten was replaced against Wavell, we got the clarity that we are going to get independence very soon. Whether it is at the cost of one nation or at the cost of two nations, that is secondary. So we have to frame a constitution for ourselves. So initially in 1946, we have the assembly called Provincial Assembly. In the Provincial Assembly, we have the members elected for this. So in order to draft a constitution, we need some key members who are senior leaders who will be elected from the people and will give their representation. The steps were taken in such a way that we will have representation from all the categories. The main categories of representation what we need is from the Congress party, that is from entire nation, which is considered as an outlook of the entire India. Next, the Muslim League, which got recently elevated because after the 1940 period and onwards, and the Sikh community, who are facing some issues against the equality issues. So the Congress, then coming to the Muslims, then coming to the Sikhs. These three categories of people would have their equal representation. This was one point which is kept in the mindset before they framed the Constituent Assembly. Now moving on to the Constituent Assembly. What is this Constituent Assembly? The Constituent Assembly is an assembly which is given or entitled the responsibility of framing a constitution for a larger nation like India. In this, how many members do we have? The total number of members are nearly 382 members, but the Congress membership is 293. Congress had 293 members, whereas Muslim League had 92 members. 92 from Muslim League. These people are representing from the different communities. We also have representation from the princely states. From each princely states we have one more member who is representing the entire princely states. Now we have to get a doubt here. Why do we need representation from the princely states? Because the princely states are neither going to get into Indian Union or going to be separate from the Indian Union. We don't have any clarity on their stand, what they are going to do after we get independence. So as they are going to be the neighbors of the nation of independent India, if not they are not going to join into the Indian Union, so they decided that they also should have their say, because they also were part and parcel of the British domain, so they also could put their views which is necessary for all of us. In that point of criteria, they decided that we should have representatives from Congress, Muslim League and also from the princely states plus the Sikhs. So finally we got the Constituent Assembly set up first. There are criticisms against the Constituent Assembly. Constituent Assembly was not truly elected directly. The Constituent Assembly is elected from the Provincial Assembly. Provincial Assembly is elected with the voting percentage of less than just 10%. In the 100% of a nation where only 10% of people are given the voting rights, from them we got the elected representatives for Provincial Assembly, from them we got the elected representatives of the Constituent Assembly. So it is truly clear that it is not at all a democratic representation or a direct representation of the entire nation. But in order to take and carry forward the entire responsibility of framing a constitution, the responsibility was entrusted with the leaders of Jawaharlal Nehru, B.R. Ambedkar and some of the famous leaders to take it carry forward and to frame a nice constitution or a perfect constitution for the growing and emerging India. Now, if the Provincial Assembly is not a true representation, Constituent Assembly is automatically not a direct representation, then Congress is not considered as a true representation of Indian nation and Muslim League is only considered for Muslim people. Now, did Indians get a perfect constitution which will fit to all the people? Did it fit to all the sections of the people? What is the mind or the point that is guiding all the Indians or the members of the Constituent Assembly to go in a path or a view that which is going to bring a elaborate and a detailed constitution for all the people, at the same time to satisfy the needs of all the issues? Let us discuss about this. Now, how did the Constituent Assembly frame the constitution? Let us discuss here. The Constituent Assembly further be written as CA. Now, the CA or the Constituent Assembly came with a view that Jawaharlal Nehru in his meetings expressed in 1946 that we are going to represent the nation of not only the people who are present here, but at the same time we have to represent the people those who are absent here. We have to represent the mindset of the people those who are absent here. We are going to address the issues or the problems or the issues which are not solved by any of the government till that time further. We are going to frame a constitution which is going to be satisfied for all categories of people, all sections of people, all castes of people, all the other things, and till now what are the problems that we have faced should not be faced by any other Indian in the future. Jawaharlal Nehru was strictly in his view that those who are present here are not only representing the entire India, but at the same time we are here to make a constitution for entire India and for the future generations. It is the responsibility on our shoulders that we are going to give the nation a bright and a wonderful constitution which is going to satisfy the needs of all the people, at the same time provides the ideology of the Indians or the Indian culture, Indian tradition, or the problems what Indians have faced from the British domain. So we have to move out from all these things. So they are in a clear view that who are present here are not only the representatives, who are present here, only their views will not be considered here, who are not present here, whose representation was not at all present here, their views also will be considered very clearly, their issues also will be discussed very clearly. This is a statement made by Jawaharlal Nehru at that point of time when the assembly meetings were going on. From this point we can get a clarity that Jawaharlal Nehru is one of the key leaders or one of the prominent important leaders in the Constituent Assembly along with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So from that we get a clarity that the members of the Constituent Assembly had consciousness and insight that they are not only the true representatives of the nation, but along with them we have a vast nation. At that time the population of India was 400 million. So they are going to represent the entire 400 million people, and each and every person should be entitled or given some rights according to the framework of the constitution. That is the reason why we got the detailed perfect constitution for our nation. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar acted as the chairman of the drafting committee. He was one of the key members who studied the various other constitutions and came to the conclusion like which constitution is going to fit for the Indian curriculum or the Indian context. He studied detailedly all the other constitutions like the Britain Constitution, the American Bill of Rights, the Irish Constitution, the Sweden Constitution, the Canadian Constitution, the Austrian Constitution, the Irish Constitution, the Ireland Constitution, and after studying the various constitutions, from America we got the Bill of Rights, from the Canadian Constitution we took the federation purpose or the setup or the concurrent powers or the distribution of the powers. Then from the American setup we did not take the citizenship. Like that we have adopted each feature which is very good in their context of the nation and which is very perfectly run in that particular nation where the people are satisfied with that kind of setup. And we also took up from the French constitution that liberty, equality and fraternity. So after taking all the key points which are necessary for the people in the nation, along with that we also took some of the key words or the key laws from the 1935 Government of India Act. After studying entire thing in detail, our leader Mr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chairman of the drafting committee, presented his views in the Constituent Assembly. It was thoroughly discussed in the Constituent Assembly. It was kept open for 8 months and for all the members in India, not only for the Constituent Assembly members, it is for all the members of Indian nation or the citizens of Indian nation can put forth their views and write letters or send their messages and discuss them with the Constituent Assembly, and everything was discussed for 8 months. Every views were kept. Nearly 7,000 amendments were suggested. In that 2,500 amendments were changed, and finally the Constituent Assembly drafted a framework of Indian Constitution, and the great task was done in 2 years, 11 months, 18 days, and they could reach the final destination, and the final approval of the Constituent Assembly towards the Constitution was done on 26th November 1949, and the day itself for the declaration of the adoption of the Constitution was made on 26th Jan 1950. So this is the entire process how the Indian Constitution was adopted and came into the framework. What are the basic ideals that are thought or the powers which are given for the Indians? What is the idea of Ambedkar in giving a framework of parliamentary setup to India? We will discuss about that. Now we shall discuss how was the Constituent Assembly introduced the Constitution into the effect. It was the date on from 1946 we are working out. The Constituent Assembly is framing the Constitution. There were many additions, many deletions, many discussions going on, and this is a process going on. Finally, on 4th November 1948, the chairman of the drafting committee, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, was standing in the Constituent Assembly and used the statement, "Mr. President, sir, I now introduce the Constitution of the Constituent Assembly, which was framed by the drafting committee, which was given the entire responsibility to ensure that the reports which are given by the other committees will be drafted very clearly and fairly and will be put forth your view so that it could be adopted." Now, what are the other committees that referred what is necessary for our Indian nation to the drafting committee? Drafting committee, in the name itself we can understand draft means to frame it and fix it. So what are the other committees that are reported them to do the things? Let us see here. First one is the Union Powers Committee. The powers of the Union government, or how are the powers of the other nations, these all were studied and given reference to the drafting committee by the Union Powers Committee. Next, moving on to the Union Constitution Committee. How is the union of the other nations? How are the constitutional powers vested with the union governments? These all were discussed in the Union Constitution Committee. Next, Provincial Constitution Committee. How are the states? How are the governments sharing power between the center and the states? What is a federal setup? What is a unitary setup? What is the difference between these two? What are the advantages of unitary? What are the advantages of federal? What are the disadvantages of both of them? These all were discussed through the provincial committees. Later we have the committees on advisory boards. What are the other setup or the constitutional framework required? What are the councils to be set up to govern or to guide the government or to give advices for them? How to take advices from them? Who should be given the authority to advise the government or president or the prime minister? Whether the advisory should be binding on them or not. These all were discussed by the advisory committee. Moving on to the minority affairs. As India was born of the communal riots and we have faced many problems of Hindus and Muslims fighting between each other when the clash with the final division was done, they have to go on for migrating from one place to another place. In this process, they came forward with the minority rights. Even 1% or 2% of the population are in that particular caste or category of people. Their rights should be safeguarded very clearly. How are the other governments safeguarding them? This was discussed during the minority committee's reports. And the fundamental rights, the basic heart of the constitution, that is the fundamental rights, which we have borrowed from the Bill of Rights from America, which is a key one for the entire constitution, was discussed in the fundamental rights committee. Then moving on to the tribal rights. In India we have many tribal communities staying in every state. We have a tribal community. So looking at the tribal community people, how their rights have to be entrusted other than the minority community people. So everybody will get their say. That is the reason why they have appointed the tribal committee also to discuss on this. So finally the Union Powers Committee, the Union Constitution Committee, the Provincial Committee, then moving on to the Advisory Committee, Minorities Committee, Fundamental Rights Committee, then the Tribal Committee. All these committees made their reports in the process of from 1946 to 1948, and they drafted their views and put forth in front of the drafting committee. Then again the drafting committee analyzed all these views, and again they did the additions and the deletions whichever is necessary, whichever is apt for our Indian context. Then later they came forward on 4th of November 1948. Then finally Ambedkar stands in front of the Constituent Assembly and requests the President to adopt the Constitution for discussion and later to adopt it. In this way, after they introduced the bill in the Constituent Assembly of the presence of the President, it was given a span of 8 months of period where everybody can put forth their views, and everybody's view will be considered if it is truly genuine and if it is addressing any particular issue which is not addressed by any of these committees. Almost all the points are covered in these committees, but if still any further points are left out or any issue is left out or any particular community people are left out, they can put forth their views, and it is ample of time was given 8 months, and finally it was adopted. After 8 months we came to a conclusion that this is one of the best constitutions in the world. It has nearly 315 schedules of articles and divided into 8 schedules. But now in actual reality we have 444 articles divided into 12 schedules or parts. But it is India's constitution is the lengthiest constitution in the world ever since in the bulk of the volume, and also the time span also was taken was too much, 2 years, 11 months, 18 days. But we feel that it was the best constitution survived till the nation, because some nations whose constitution was adopted very soon in a less span of time, but the nations failed in getting their success of the nations, and nations broke down into independent nations. But India is still surviving as a strong nation, and people of India are still happy to a larger extent. All the interests of the people are advised and admired in the Indian constitution, and if any person feels he is deprived of the rights or anything, he can move on to get his rights to be done. That is all done in the constitutional framework for us. So Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's efforts and all the members of the Constituent Assembly efforts were sincerely dedicated, and all of them have put for their efforts for the future of the Indian nation. Let us hope the Constitution survives and lives long. Now let us discuss what are the points, or how did we adopt the other nations towards our nation, and how did we modify them and fix them to our context. We will discuss. Now, what did the constitution framers adopt from the other constitutions? What made the constitution framers to think and change them? Now, as Mr. Ambedkar expressed his view in the Constituent Assembly that if a student is kept forth on his hand the constitution book into his hands and ask him to read it, the first question what comes into his mind is what type of government is going to be there and what is the other form of the system or the rules and regulations which we are going to follow it. So in answering this question in the parliament or in the Constituent Assembly, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar gave the answer that Indians are fit, or for the Indian context it is fit to have a parliamentary form of government. For Indian context it is fit to have the parliamentary form of government. Then what about the powers of the president? In this explaining in this process of time, he compares India with US. See here, India, United States. Indians have adopted the parliamentary setup. In India we have president, in US also we have the president. In Indian president is just like a nominal one. He is not the real executive. He is like a Britain queen who is for the status of the nation, who is representing the entire nation and whose the government decisions will be entitled to public only with the authorization of the president. This is the view of our Ambedkar in putting president in Indian context. When we move on to the American president, where the Americans are also following the parliamentary setup, but it is not the prime ministerial setup, it is a presidential setup. It is direct representation. The president is elected directly by the people in America, and president have the enormous powers. Here president is not the real executive, he is a nominal executive in the Indian context. But moving on to America, American president is the real executive. What is the meaning of the word real executive? Real executive means that the entire powers are entrusted in his hands. He can appoint anyone as his secretary. He will be having the various secretaries under him working directly discharging his responsibilities. He will have the powers to appoint anyone and to remove anyone at any point of time. He is having the entire powers to discharge all the duties under his name. And he is the supreme commander of the three armed forces. And he has that powers to declare war with any nation. These are the powers of the American president. His check was very limited by the parliament or the senate of America. But moving on to India, the Indian president is a nominal one. He also is the commander of all the three naval armed forces, and he is having the special powers. He can appoint the prime minister, he can appoint all the other ministers. Without the approval of the president, no bill turns into an act, and no person can be made as a minister or prime minister or any other positions without the knowledge of the president. But provided all these are under the control of the prime minister, and president is bound by the advice of the prime minister. When it comes to America, American president is not bound by any advice given by any of his secretaries of the states, and he is just can listen to the advice, but the final decision can be taken by the president of America. He is independent of the advice given by the secretaries of the states who are working under him. But when we move on to the Indian prime minister or Indian president is especially bound by the advice of the prime minister of India. Here the Indians elect prime minister directly. Even directly we don't elect the prime minister also. We elect the members of the Lok Sabha. The members of Lok Sabha of the winning party will elect their leader. Which party gets majority in the Lok Sabha will be called by the president. The president have only choice when he is having a slight majority of variation between the two major parties who got the maximum number of seats required to form a government. Then he can have a word saying that either this or that. Other than that, the president does not have any choice of calling except calling the winning party to come and form the government. In these all points, or in the wake of this, why did Ambedkar prefer to go for presidential form not than the American type of presidential form? Because in India we have various categories of people, and we are not following the direct representation. If suppose president is given the entire powers as if that of the American president, so president may sometimes go in a arbitrary or like a monarchic setup, or like a fascist liberal, or like a Hitler, like Nazi, which turned into a Hitlership. So now he, in his point of view, to check every action of the leaders, to make them clear on their stand, any bill should be discussed very clearly in the parliament of both the houses, should get the approval of both the houses, then should be move on to the final check of the president. So in these three stages of filtration, so if any negativities are found, they can be further be addressed and changed in this process of filtration. This was the ideology behind Ambedkar putting off the parliamentary setup of view and making the president a true representative of the nation and not the perfect real executive. He is going to represent the nation on the viewpoint that if the people of any problem is present, the constitutional head is going to be the president, but the real head is going to be the prime minister. The powers of the president in India are very contrary to the powers of the president of America. American president is the real executive. The unquestioned authority is vested with the president of America. When it comes to Indian prime president, we don't have any unquestioned authorities. Indian prime minister is having the equal powers with that of the American president, provided if he has confidence in the houses. Whereas the American president, once elected, cannot be removed for the next term of his elections of the office. But Indian prime minister, if he loses the confidence in the house, he can be removed or he has to resign immediately. In this point of time, he want to make that the leaders to be addressable to the nation. The leaders should be bound by the advice of the people. The people will have their say against the leaders. In this context or in this view, because we have faced the 200 years domination of the Britishers, where Indians were not at all considered at any point of time, the views of the Indians were not at all considered, and strictly Indians were considered as dogs. So he want to make Indians feel that they are the true representatives of the nation. They can choose their leaders, and from their leaders representatives they will choose their leaders. In this point of time, he made this kind of thing to set up of a true democratic spirit of the parliamentary system. And even he have a president as that of American president, but our president is having very limited powers when compared to the president of America. Now moving on to the other similarity what the Indian and the American constitutions are having is that the Indian constitution as well as the American constitution frameworks have kept in view the word of federalism. What is federalism? What is the meaning of the word federalism? What do we get covered in the word of federalism? What is the similarity between Indian and the American context? Federalism is, according to the history, it is having two set of governments. And the contrary to this is a one set of government. The federalism means two set of governments. What is the meaning of the word federal? Federal is taken from the word called fidovus. It is a Latin word meaning fidovus. It is the Latin word which is giving a meaning of called agreement. Now, what is the view opposite to this? We have opposite to federalism, we have the future of unitary government. Then what is unitary government? What is federal government? What are the views of unitary government? What are the views of federal government? Why did Indians did not pitch for the unitary government, and what made them to move on towards the federal setup? What are the points that made them to guide towards this one? Now let us see here. What is unitary government is that in unitary government we have only one polity. Polity means that the framework of the government, the rules, the regulations, the setup of the government, the polity. So in single polity, a nation where we have 400 million of population at that point of time can't address all the issues. This is the view expressed by many of them in the Constituent Assembly. So in order to get rid of the problems of the people in the unitary view, where it is fit only for the small regions like Athens or small countries like Italy and all these nations where they are following the unitary set of government. Now, what is the meaning of federal government? Federal government, we know the meaning is fidus, the meaning is agreement. It is a Latin word. It's meaning that we have two set of governments. It is the technical term is dual polity. What is dual polity? I think we all know what is the meaning of the word polity. Polity is a word which gives us the meanings, rules and regulations of the entire government, set up ministers and everything. Now dual means two. So what is two polities? How can two governments will be framed? Simple. We have two governments. One is at the central level. The other one will be at the respective state level. The technical terms are union, regional. Union government, regional government. Now how can the powers be shared between these two? That is the reason why I explained the meaning of the word federal, or it's taken from Fedo's meaning agreement. The constitution has divided the powers between the two governments. They have given some autonomy for these two governments in their particular spheres for them. For example, the central government is given the entire responsibility, or the union government is given the entire responsibility of maintaining the context of the entire nation, like defense, the foreign policy of India, the military policy of India, the naval policy of India, the economic policy of India, the financial system of India, the boundary setup of India. All these are given the responsibility of the union government. The education policy of India will be framed by the union government. Moving on to the other things, what about the other government's responsibilities? For example, a country like India, where if you suppose forests, the region of forest comes under the union government, then what about the region of Rajasthan region where there are no forests? What are the steps that are going to be taken there? Marriage or the local education policy. For these kind of issues, police administration. The army administration is given for the central powers, then the police administration is given for the respective local governments. So in order to maintain the autonomy in the fields and in order to decentralize the power between them, we have given the authority for them in two parts. So the union government is given the responsibilities on certain issues. The other issues were given the power for the regional parties or the regional powers, or especially the state governments, in order to address the local issues very clearly. For example, a person who is staying in the local region will understand the problems very clearly when compared to a person who is staying in Delhi. This is also one of the logic which is behind the power of sharing the powers here. So in the federal setup, where you have two set of governments, where the entire responsibility is shared between these two. Now to get a clarity on these things, the union government is having some responsibilities and some rights or some powers to certain areas. At the same time, the regions, for example, like Andhra region has a government of its own party or rule, where the Andhra Pradesh state government will have the responsibility of looking after the entire Andhra issues, and overall responsibility is for the central government. In the 29 states of India and one union government, it's not an easy task for the union government to look after all the issues of the all 29 states plus the 7 union territories. So the union government has some responsibilities, and the other minor responsibilities were entrusted with the local governments or the state governments for them to get a better access for it. But we have to remember that the union government is truly bit powerful, like 51% of powers are given for union government, and 49% are given for the state governments. Because in order to maintain the unity of India, in order to maintain the equilibrium balance, if any disturbance occurs in between any state, so that the unitary powers are given for the central government and the states are given a bit less powers. And if any law is made by central government and the state governments on the same issue, the issue of same point which is made by both of them, then the state government law will become void and the central government law will prevail on that particular issue here. In this way, the federal setup was brought to India. Not only this, the similarities between Indian and the American context are going to come to an end, because in America also we have the same federal setup. They also have around some 50 states, and they also have a strong central government or the union government, but at the same time they have a special autonomy for the state governments. Both run in parallel to each other, both does not coincide with each other. These are the major similarities. We have the parliamentary setup in America and in India. We have the federal setup in America as well as in India. These are two major similarities what we are having. Moving on to the dissimilarities or the other issues which are having us and which are not similar to the American setup, we will discuss them. Now, as our constitution is moving forward, we can get a question that we don't have any critics who are criticizing the constitution. This is the answer for that. See here, we have critics of Constituent Assembly. One is Mr. Maulana Hasrat Mohani. Maulana Hasrat Mohani clearly criticized the Constituent Assembly that it is nothing that the Constituent Assembly has framed a new constitution except than the 1935 Act. They have simply redrafted the 1935 Act. They did not add anything further. The cabinet mission which did not give the universal adult franchise was added for this. Other than this, the efforts were very less. This is the point of view where Maulana Hasrat Mohani came with, and redrafting of 1935 Government of India Act is not a real constitution. What is his point of view? He made a criticism against the existing thing. And the other major criticism what we got is from Mr. Damodar Swarup Seth. He is also known as in the short form D.S. Seth. He put his views that India finally moved on with a government of union government, where the union government is really a very strong government when compared to the state governments which are given for us. So, in the technical terms or in the federalism, the true federalism spirit was not followed. It was made clear that the union governments will have major powers, and because he got this view by dividing of the powers. In order to get the clarity on the division of the powers or to autonomy of the state governments and the central governments, the constitution has divided the subjects or the issues into three categories. One is the central list, the other one is the state list, third one is the concurrent list. Central list, the entire powers on the subjects of the central list were given to the central government. State list, the entire powers on the state list of the subjects are given to the state governments. And the concurrent list is given to the state as well as for the central government. But in case on any of the subjects of the concurrent list, if the central government passes any law, then the state government law, even if it is in the condition of the existing thing, becomes null, and the central government becomes the valid law, which means that central government has powers on the central list as well as on the concurrent list. The state government is having rights only on the state list subjects. So, in this point of view, he made a statement that we unknowingly or knowingly, we went to the unitary form of government. We are not in the true set of federal government. And as Mahatma Gandhi always pointed out that we should follow the complete pattern of decentralization. The decentralization should be followed and not the concentration of power at a single hand or a single point of time. So, centralization was completely opposed by Mahatma Gandhi. He was a strong follower of Mahatma Gandhi's ideologies. So, he put forth his view saying that even Mahatma Gandhi did not like the strong unitary form of government. So, how could we like the form of government? We should not support this kind of form of government because it is completely unitary form of government. And he also have a fear that the government may turn as a fascist government. Fascist government is nothing but the government which is elected in Italy by Mussolini became the leader or a turned dictator. Mussolini had his own ideology that what is a motherhood for a woman is a war for a nation. So, in that he made the supremacy of the nation and war is must for the people. In the same way, if you have a strong central government, the views will be taken forward in a dictator point of view. Very soon, or there may be a chance of moving towards the fascist principles, or maybe guided towards the fascism, which we not at all liked it, or the Nazism. So, Dr. Swarup Seth made clear that centralization should not be there in the union powers, but it should be decentralized and the power should be distributed as far as possible so that we don't get any strong initiative and a strong leadership which may turn into a dictatorship. This is the view, or the critics express their views on this. What are the other criticisms which are expressed? How are the debates going on the other issues? For example, we shall take on the fundamental rights. What is the doubt raised on the fundamental rights? What is the alternative given for that? What is the further issue discussed? How far the issue went on? Who raised the issue against the fundamental rights? We will discuss now. We shall now have an example debate on how was the debates conducted in the Constituent Assembly regarding the topic called fundamental rights. So, look at here, it was the date of 29th of April 1947 where the Honorable President was sitting in his chair, Mr. Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was sitting there, and we have these candidates who are asking questions on the issue of the fundamental rights. Actually, they are not asking on the issue of fundamental rights, they were discussing about the topic called untouchability. The untouchability was mentioned in the clause of 6. Sixth clause. Mr. Pramod Ranjan has raised an issue that what is the meaning of untouchability? We are using this word from 25 years past. What is the exact meaning of the word untouchability? What would be the criteria to say that this is untouchability? That should be determined very clearly, otherwise we can't come into the clarity like what is going to be untouchability for the people, because we have various kinds of untouchabilities. Then the other members of the committee like Mr. S.C. Banerjee also made a statement that even though Mahatma Gandhi was the forerunner of untouchability, who called them as Harijans, who clearly stated that entry of them into the temples or allowing them to drink water with a glass or allowing them to be in the public meeting of lunch or all these things or public dining and all these things. So what is the exact meaning of untouchability is the view expressed by Mr. S.C. Banerjee. Then Sri Rohini came forward and expressed his view that there should be a clear definition stating that there should be ban of any kind of discrimination on untouchability. That is called untouchability. This is a definition determined by that. Then moving on to the view of Mr. M.K. Munshi. M.K. Munshi put forth his views that it should be better to add it that irrespective of race, category, region or sex, any discrimination based on birthplace or any place of region or his sex also should be considered as untouchability. That also should not be spared. Then Mr. Dhirendranath came with a view that it would not be better or appropriate to add sex towards this or the birthplace, but it should be made clear that untouchability should not be in any point of time or any context should be valid in any corner of the world. It should be left out for the judges. Then we got the another opinion that if the judges are given the right to determine what is untouchability, some judges would determine that X is an untouchability factor, then the other judges may determine that Y is an untouchability factor. In some regions, X may be an untouchability factor, the other regions may not consider X as an untouchability factor. So, in order to get clarity on what is untouchability, in order to get knowing what is untouchability and clearly determine the laws and people get the rights equally determined for them, we should have the clarity on untouchability. After listening to the entire discussions of the untouchability, the Honorable President sitting on the chair, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, made a clear statement that the legislature, the union legislature will make a clear definition of untouchability, and it is a responsibility of the union legislature to determine the punishment also, or the offences which are considered against the untouchability should be punished very strictly and severely. This, after a thorough discussion on the untouchability, we came to a conclusion that untouchability should not be spared at any point of time. Any kind of untouchability should not be accepted in any corner of the nation. So, Mr. President agreed it and gave a call to the union government to make a clear statement on what is untouchability. It is excluded from the Central Constituent Assembly to make on the abolition of untouchability, but it should be given for the union government to determine what is untouchability and what are the consequences if you do untouchability or if you discriminate anybody on the basis of the untouchability. In this way, the discussions were very healthy and positive, and they were very much broad-minded to discuss on any point of time. This is just an example for us, like how was our constitution framers discussing about the various issues before they were incorporated into this. Untouchability was abolished, and we got this in Article 17. Any kind of untouchability or any kind of discrimination is not at all spared, and we can move on to get our rights of equality here in this point of untouchability. This was a great step taken by our constitution framers. Through thorough discussion, we got the abolition of untouchability. Earlier, there are even many villages where the discrimination is followed. Let us hope that the constitution reaches to the ground level and nobody faces the untouchability further. Now we are moving on from the British domain of 200 years of domination, and we have emerged into an independent nation. Now moving on with the view that we are completely exploited in everything and we are suppressed in every point and we were made like slaves. This is the intention which was expressed by all the Indians, so we fought against the Britishers, we achieved our independence. Jawaharlal Nehru in the Constituent Assembly made a clear statement that we are now breaking the shells of the past of India, but at the same time we are making a garment for the future fitting all its requirements. So drafting a garment or making a garment is not an easy task. And how is the constitution linked with the society? We are making laws, framing laws. At the same time, we have to make the people or the citizens of India to feel that they are in the better hold. So the social engineering concept has emerged here. Engineering in the sense giving a perfect plan of everything. Engineer is the one who plans everything. So society to be planned properly. All sections of people should be planned properly to reach their goals successfully. Now moving on to the here concepts. The main concepts which are addressed by Jawaharlal Nehru is that one, we have discussed about the untouchability, how the untouchability should be discussed in the Fundamental Constituent Assembly. We have seen how it has to be defined, how the punishment has to be given, how broad-mindedly they have thought like each and every corner of India should be given free of irrespective of the untouchability or no untouchability at any point of time. Now moving on to the other aspect here, the other important major step which was taken by the Constituent Assembly is granting special powers or privileges for scheduled caste and scheduled tribal community people, because the most deprived people of the society of India is the scheduled caste and scheduled tribal people. In order to protect them and in order to lead them to the equal status of the other people and to get the real equality in the society, the people are to be governed properly, and to get them success here, the scheduled caste and scheduled tribal people are given special requirements in the jobs, special reservation in the jobs, even in the parliament certain seats are reserved for them so that they can be brought up equally with the other communities and get them attached with them. And moving on to the other major step where the Nazis were felt that they are superior and the Jews were feel like they were killed literally, the minority community, and they should not be feel marginalized, the minorities. The right to the minorities also was being mentioned in the Constituent Assembly and in our Constitution, clearly mentioning that rights of the minorities are nowhere questioned or stopped at any point of time. So Jawaharlal Nehru was on the clear picture of social engineering of the Constitution, that untouchability should not be bared at any point of time, and see, the scheduled caste and scheduled tribal people should be given the equal importance and even necessary the other push up for them to make them equal with the other categories of the people. And moving on to the minorities, the minority rights of 1% or 2% or 10% people have to be protected very carefully and should be feel that they are secular outlook and no one is marginalized from the community, because 80% of them are Hindus, the remaining 20% of the people also have to feel secular. These are the views which are expressed by them, and they seriously strictly brought all these things and they incorporated them in the fundamental rights. They brought some special laws and even they mentioned all these things in the directive principles of state policy also, so that all the guidelines for the governments of central and the state governments also were given in this to ensure equality for everybody. In this way, the true spirit of democracy and equality was brought up in the framing of the Constitution. What is the present status of the Constitution? What is happening right now? What are the major changes which were brought in our Constitution? We will see now. Now, how is the Constitution today? Now, the Constitution framers were clearly aware that as per the time moves on, there could be changes which are required to be done for the Constitution. So, they have made clearly evident statements that if necessary, if you want to change any of the Constitution framework, you can move on with the statement of like Parliament should approve it with 2/3 majority in both the houses. That is, with Lok Sabha and with Rajya Sabha, plus it should be approved by the President to get any further changes. But at the same time, in 1970 we got the major change for our Constitution, that is, they added words of the word socialist and secular. Socialist and secular were added in 1970 because the words like liberty, equality and fraternity are giving the broader sense of secular and socialistic outlook. So in order to get that feeling for us, they added these two words to make it a meaningful preamble here. And at the same time, one of the judgments which was given by the Supreme Court regarding the Kesav Chandra Bharati case, which was done in 1970s, it clearly mentioned that we cannot change some of the basic structures of the Constitution. Now, in this case, where the Kesav Chandra Bharati case versus against the government, they clearly mentioned that the fundamental rights are the basic rights and the basic structure of the Constitution cannot be changed. But there are some issues or some doubts expressed by many of them, like what is the meaning of the word basic structure of the Constitution mean? The basic structure of the Constitution has some of the clarifications given by the constitutional experts is that we have the form of the government. The form of the government cannot be changed by anybody even if that gets the approval of the Parliament. The next one is that the federal setup. The federal setup also cannot be changed by the Parliament of its approval or further. This is the basic structure. The next one is the supremacy of the nation, or the supremacy of the governments, or supremacy of the justice, or supremacy of the judiciary. Moving on to the sovereignty of the nation. The sovereignty of the nation cannot be questioned or changed at any point of time. Moving on to the justice, we have a singular independent judiciary setup that should not be changed. So these are considered to be one of the basic structures including the fundamental rights. These all are considered as a basic structure because of all these things living or existing in the constitution only, we are able to provide or ensure a welfare state to all the Indians. This is why it is considered as a basic structure of the constitution, and at any point of time, even after 50 years or even after 100 years also, we can't change the basic structure of the constitution according to the judgment given by the Supreme Court regarding the Keshav Chandra Bharati case in 1974. The constitution is still surviving. We have many amendments done for it, for the small minors, and we have nearly 110 amendments as per date which were done. So amendments are done for the constitution to upgrade it to the necessary requirements, because the constitution was framed 60 years ago. In order to meet the requirements of the present generation, some minor arrangements were made, but the basic structure is as the same, but the other things we can amend it with the approval of the parliament. So the constitution is a living concept or a living document which is getting upgraded year by year. That's all we have for the Constitution of India today.